All right. So excited for today's guest. This is Julie Carroll, business development consultant at Puzzle HR. And I was really struck when I had the pleasure of connecting with Julie by how kind of disruptive and revolutionary she is in her approach to HR and what it should and can be versus what people may think of it as. So Julie, before we kind of dig into the conversation today, I'd love to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and what you're doing currently at Puzzle HR.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Nikki. I'm excited to join your conversation. So I'm a business consultant, business development HR consultant with Puzzle HR. My career path has widely been owning and operating my own businesses. I like to say I'm a differentiator in the market since I I'll call it ranked up, started in the business and finance and operations of individual companies, and then kind of transitioned to that strategic planning and HR where my passion really aligns. I work with industries across the country. Currently, I am with Puzzle HR, which is, kind of a fractional outsourcing HR. Over here in the Northeast region, I'm on a team servicing this kind of whole Northeast corridor all the way down to Florida. There's 7 of us together. And
Florida.
Yeah, right, where it's toasty warm. So my role really is business development. What is that? So many different things, but reaching out with employers, finding what their pain points are, looking at solutions and helping them achieve the change that's just so, readily available and needed right now, given the pandemic. Things are, on speed. So really looking at that. And so I'm excited to join you and kind of, talk about all things HR and the differences and the changes, because everyone has a different, catchphrase for it right now. So
yeah, there is nothing but buzzwords going on right now. So
absolutely.
I'm passionate about kind of digging beneath the surface of those buzzwords. And that will be kind of our focus today, is really talking about how do you walk the talk and not just talk the talk, because there's a lot of people talking the talk right now with any trend. That's what happens. We all jump on board. But before we dig into kind of how you go about walking the talk with driving positive culture change, Julie, tell us about your why. What drives and motivates you in business, and why do you have the passion that you do for your role?
I definitely, I guess I'm project oriented. So I love to find kind of, I don't want to say a problem, but find a pain point, find an area that needs kind of some redirection, jump in, find solutions, and watch that change. So for me, and a lot of times that's with the business owner themselves, whether it's changing their mindset, changing their policies, or really educating them on the changes in HR. And seeing that success, I think is what motivates me, extremely passionate. I'm entrepreneurial. I think, I love that environment. There's a lot of passion, execution, and change there. So I really like to be in a point where we can identify a problem. Here's the solutions. Here's the team that's going to help you do it. And seeing that success change on a global frontage really is what I think drives me to keep doing what I've been doing for the last 15 years in HR.
All right, well, fantastic. I love that you found a career that you make such an impact in, and that you're seeing that impact. That is kind of what drives and motivates all of us, is to see the results of our hard work. It's not the work itself, it's what comes from it. So I'm happy to hear you're having such an impact and that you're seeing that in the employer groups that you partner with. What do you wish more people understood about what the role of human resources should and can be versus what maybe some people consider it to be?
I think it's always been a challenge with HR in an organization for business owners, because they don't see a dollar return on their investment initially, right? And that's what drives a lot of business owners, is where can I make the most money? What is this giving me return on? How does that impact our business globally? So years ago, it was funny. I would meet a lot of that resistance with business owners and CEOs. And I used to say, listen, you pay for the collision part of your auto insurance. So why don't you think of HR that way? Right? There's no return on your investment on that P&L every single month when you're paying that auto insurance, but you're glad you have it if you get in the big accident. So, at the very least, think of HR in those terms, right? So how can we improve, if you think about your auto insurance each year, you look at it, where can I add a better benefit? Where can I come up with, more safety? What's going to give me, the best bang for my buck, shall we say? So I think if we could get business owners to sometimes think about that in HR, they'll realize that that HR is larger than just your people and culture. I think one of the things that we've been able to make a huge impact on during the pandemic is real dollars in tax credits, helping with PPP loans, whether that's actually helping with the work or doing the education piece. So being able to see that initial dollar return on an HR investment is critical. Where can we provide fundings or grants that help the company improve their kind of overall culture, right? And that's a buzzword, right? As you said, Nikki, that's a big buzzword. What is culture? I mean, it's changed for a lot of organizations. Culture now might be your remote workforce versus your on-site workforce, a reduction in workforce. When employees feel heard, then I think the overall culture changes dramatically. So I think business owners really need to understand that HR is now a required headcount in your organization, no matter what size you are. We've got the compliance pieces, but then how do we meet the changes of today's workforce? Because that's kind of where we were heading, and the pandemic escalated that. Employees have choices. They want a difference. They want to be heard. And every company needs to be looking at how they can make that change happen in their organization. So HR really needs to be a headcount. Whereas years ago, it wasn't necessarily always there, and it's never been required.
Yeah, I've seen it, depending on size of organization, I've seen it treated as a nice to have instead of a have to have, or like we're between HR. So, we're filling the gap between our operations manager and this person. And can you take on this role with interviewing and hiring? I've been in a lot of situations like that, and seen the very real gap that occurs when there's not some, from my perspective as a hiring manager and leading the division, not having HR and doing a lot of hiring and firing during that period, during the pandemic. That was really stressful. And I needed the guidance and support of HR, who has none of us knew how to respond to the pandemic and furloughing people and potentially firing people and bringing in new people in a very uncertain environment. That was a new challenge. I've done a lot of hiring and firing in my career, but not in that kind of environment. And that's where somebody who has this detailed background would have been really helpful to me in my personal experience in that role. And I imagine that same value translates to any business leader who's just simply doing the best they can with all this uncertainty. And you hit the nail on the head. There's so much change, and even the change to remote. If you're not familiar with working remotely, that's a massive transition in itself. Julie, you were mentioning that kind of before we hit recording, when we were just chit-chatting a little bit, that you went through the transition to remote work as well. Can you share a little bit about kind of what you experienced with that and what perspective it's provided when you're supporting your business partners as well?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great point, Nikki. I'm an HR consultant and, widely ran, prior to Puzzle HR, an outsourcing HR company, I had my own workforce and team, and we had a lot of flexibility to work remote when we needed or wanted, children, life balance, and all of that. But I really ran the organization that, remote work was problematic all the time, that we'd miss the collaboration. We wouldn't be able to provide that ongoing support to each other. And then hits the pandemic and there's no choice but be remote, and myself included. I was always someone who likes to be out there in front of people and, really having the conversation as we're having today. Enjoyed that interaction. So for me, the first 3 months of COVID, I was like, oh, I don't like this. I don't know. But as you and I were talking about, I laugh now and people laugh when I say, oh, I'm an introvert now. They're like, excuse me, Julie, you talk all the time. But I am. I like being working remote, setting my own agenda. I think for a lot of employees, the mental health plus for that has just been enormous. And we talked about it all the time, right? Oh, my commute down 128, or oh, can't believe it. By the time I drop off daycare, get to work, I'm so stressed out. When you take that away and you have the ability to get up and go for a walk before you start work, or prepare a morning breakfast for your children because you're not going to be in the car for an hour, the impact that makes on your overall productivity, I don't think we need a lot of statistics for that, just the actual looking at your workforce. So I, for one, never want to go back in an office. I am very happy remote and enjoy, finding ways to kind of increase that engagement with, I guess I want to say like consultants, employers, because I'm widely business development, right? So how do you do that when you're remote? I got to tell you, it's easier remote now than it was in person. So many people are more receptive to taking meetings and calls because they're not spending an hour to drive and meet you. I mean, there's only so many lunches you can do in a month. So I think they appreciate having the time to themselves. So it broadens the capacity to reach, I think, more people.
Couldn't agree more. So well said, Julie. Thank you. And I've worked remotely since 2004, fully remotely. So have a different perspective than most people. I'm excited for this transition. I understand how challenging it can be because it is very different. I've worked in travel at client sites or at my corporate headquarters in the past and been in an office environment. But I agree. I think you are far more productive and efficient when left to your own devices. There's no cookie cutter solution in life. Like, people work and think differently. And we kind of expect, hey, if you're in this role, everybody does it this way. There's one right way. Well, the reality is, get your work done how you get your work done. Like, I know that I'm really on top of my game in the morning. So I structure it. I get up 5:30, have my morning routine, do everything I need for my mental health and to set my day up. And then I'm killing it in the morning from like 7 to noon is my crunch time. And then the afternoon can be, fun little calls, networking events, catching up on tasks, but giving people the freedom. I say that just to say, giving people the freedom to structure their time the way that they're most efficient, you really can impact productivity. And it really costs nothing. You're saving money. If people are going remote and they understand that they truly have that flexibility and that they're supported in that flexibility to get the job done, not to do it in a certain number of hours and in a certain structure, it's really exciting to see the results that come from it. I've seen it over and over again. And I'd love to hear more about your results and stories that you've witnessed. So can you share some of the results you've observed with employers who prioritize partnering with HR in a more strategic way?
Sure. And jumping in there, Nikki, to your point, like, I think providing the overall structure and how do you time block to your employees and having the communication with them to say, okay, we're going to be remote, but that's going to require time blocking. So what is your most efficient hours to work? For some, it might be, to your point, right? If we don't have children at home, we get up at 5:30, we do our workout, we have our coffee, we walk on the beach, the ocean. You live by the ocean, I live by the lake. And then we can jump in and do this and just kill it for 5 hours. And then at 2:30, we're like, whew, let's make it light. My head's tired, right? Mm-hmm. But for others, that might be getting up and having get their children fed, everyone out, and they're going to kill it from 12 to 5. Yeah. So having that open and honest conversation with your employees and providing training on time blocking and efficiency, I mean, that's just the key to the remote workforce. Not assumptions that employees know how to do that or what to do or what the expectation is. And around that, hey, remote workers aren't really working, or, how efficient are they going to be if they're working remote? They're going to be putting the laundry in, they're going to be, but I think the real, kind of truth in that is when they are working, they're working at a much higher energy, less distractions. They're not running to the coffee machine. Some people are really annoyed. You were talking about it, by all the background noise of other people who can be in the office just chattering away. And so for them, it's very distracting almost. So I think that where I've, kind of seen change and, can share stories is having that conversation with employers. Is these employees, if you want long-term retention, are going to want to work from home. So let's not discuss how can we bring them back to the office. Let's just kind of discuss what are the needs of the business. How many do we need back in the office, right? Manufacturing, they need all the people on the floor. There's no denying it. So really helping a business owner open up with the conversation to say, listen, they're going to want to work remote because it's a more efficient workforce. It's saving them money. It's saving employers money. To your point, no more office lunches. They can reduce their footprint. So if I can get an employer to sit down and understand that, I think there were a lot of talk around, not being able to hire right now and employee retention, and others were saying, oh, it's unemployment. It's not all that. It's just the worlds all collided very quickly together. Employees can find other ways to make income now. There's lots of technology enhancements and things. So you have to want to offer them what they need. So if you're surveying your employees, ask them what they need. How many would like to return to the office? How many would like to never return to the office? What's your challenge working remote? What do you like about remote? Really getting the feedback from your employees and turning that over into an action plan, kind of what I jumped in and said, when you were talking about that, setting up trainings that are for time blocking. How to identify your efficiency zones. Where are you most productive? When are you most productive? And kind of assigning assignments or work projects in those kind of efficiency ways. I love Monday.com. We use it at Puzzle HR. It's just a nice platform that you can set up, look at your overall projects for an organization, assign it, and you can see where everyone is. And it helps employees to that time blocking of efficiency. Hey, this is due. I've got to get this done. And it gives them some goals. You can't just assume everyone knows when they're working remote.
Yeah, amen. I think that there is a real lack of education, and then a finger pointing a little bit like, well, you're lazy, you're not getting the job done well. Well, we're not born with experience. You learn through experience, and it takes trial and error, being taught, and time. And so just putting faith in people that, hey, you've hired this person because you felt they were a good fit. You've hung on to them because they're making some sort of impact in your organization. Now give them the benefit of the doubt that they aren't lazy because they're working from home now, but maybe it's a different skill set, because people are naturally change adverse. Like, we're all creatures of comfort. We don't like change. Like, we'd rather be, some people would rather be miserable over here than change and see what will happen over here. That's very common. We all do it to ourselves. I mean, I say some people, case in point, I can just point my finger right here. We all fall into that trap. And so I have found just educating people that it's okay. You're not ever nobody is working from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 100%. And when you go remote, I saw a lot of people kind of turn a fear lens on, they don't think I'm working and I need to be glued to this computer from 8 to 5 a.m. And ultimately that results in more inefficiency because they're glued to the computer, but then they're checking Facebook and LinkedIn and just doing things that are not revenue generating activities, wasting time because their brain's telling them, I can't get up, I can't go check that laundry, I can't go make a quick lunch, because they're being conditioned. Remote workers are lazy and inefficient, but telling them, hey, you should get up and go change the laundry. That takes 2 minutes, far less than it took to go get a coffee in the break room and have 7 conversations when you were in the office on the way there and back. So run and change your laundry and have no guilt about it, and then get back to your desk. So I love what you're doing.
More. I couldn't agree more. I would love to have a little meme that could have zoomed into an office employee and follow them video for a day and a remote. Because if you were looking at that and you saw an employee in the office, to your point, when they get up and go to the bathroom, how far they come back, they're getting a coffee, they leave for lunch, they come into work, they're going to go, provide communication to another employee. They walk over to their desk, they hand it off. If you added all those up and watched the remote employee, I'd love to see the statistics on that. But, and again, I think that's the part that business owners have a responsibility to educate their employees. Don't assume that they can't or won't be efficient. Provide them the tools that help them identify where they're most efficient, the times they're most efficient. And I think that overall it works wonderful that way. Really, really well. And again, being able to kind of have that communication is key. And it's so easy now, right? With Zoom, Teams, it's just so easy. As a manager, I set up my own kind of internal checkpoints. So we would meet on Mondays and I'd say, hey, it's going to start our week. Let's get on for an hour and look at what's out there, what needs to be completed through the end of the week. But by the way, how you all doing? How was your weekend? Where are you guys at? What are your challenges with completing all of this by Friday? And then we would just recap on Friday at the end of the day for 30 minutes. Did everyone stay on track? If not, where did the project fall off? How can I help? Or is it just a client-based issue? And then everyone kind of could leave for the weekend at a peace of mind that everything was, kind of discussed. So I think the engagement can be just as effective as in person. And that was a transition for my thoughts. I will agree with you, Nikki. I was widely the other way. You have to be face-to-face.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting hearing you kind of reaching this conclusion. This is really educational for me, Julie. Thank you. Because I've long been an advocate of working remotely. It's just what fits my lifestyle. We talked about the introvert and you becoming an introvert. And sometimes nobody who knows me is surprised that I'm an introvert. Somebody bought me a pair of socks that said excuse me, I'm introverting now. They were like, I love it. They were like, we saw these and we thought of you. Yeah. But I'm very outgoing and very friendly. But to me, it's always been what builds your energy, what recharges you. And some people are genuinely recharged by being in public and being around others' energy and picking them up. And I just know I've always recharged by being alone. I love to be in public and around people, but that drains me. And I need to prioritize that time alone to rebuild and have as much as I want to give to all areas of my life. So I love that we're kind of in a remote, hybrid, sometimes in person, in an environment that's really elevating all people. There is still opportunity, even virtually and through the Zooms and the different software platforms, to engage digitally. And we're starting to tiptoe back to some of that in-person activity as well.
But yeah, to your point, change and conflict, I love it. They bring resolution. Like people say, oh, conflict. I'm like, you should have conflict all the time. Conflict on thought. Now, again, right? Conflict meaning conversations, adversity conversations, negative conversations, right? But obviously, the way they should be held, because it brings enormous change, understanding, the conflict and the change, it brings resolution. It helps you identify areas that you may not have, understood in your own, let's just say, employer environment that were really lacking, or yourself internally. Like you said, Nikki, yourself, exactly, like, I'm recharged by being in my own space, setting my own parameters and really focusing, and if someone else is like, hey, I really need to get out there and have that energy, but I can work remote. So how can I get that energy outside of the remote? Where can that happen? And to your point, meetings are starting to be a little bit more important, and in person networking. So maybe it's kind of regenerating that kind of part of your business or your remote work, that, hey, maybe I will go out and meet a client once or twice a month to find that energy and still be, in remote. Some employees are remote, not by choice. The companies now made the decision to be remote. So helping that employee base as well is just as important as helping the employees that want to be remote.
100%. And you mentioned like the conflict. I agree. I'm pretty conflict adverse, but I'm not afraid to have difficult conversations. It's what you consider conflict. I'm drama adverse. I'm not conflict adverse. But if you want to bring like, the wrong emotion behind it, I'm going to probably press pause. But to me, we all say, like, we all have these platitudes, like, people don't care how much you know, how much you care. And they're said a lot. And I think people generally accept them as true. Like, yeah, of course. But I think where we kind of disconnect is that you show people how much you care through having difficult conversations. I mean, think about your own personal relationships with a significant other or children or your parents, even a friendship. Typically, you grow by conflict and by having difficult conversations, hearing the other person's perspective, and then reaching a common middle ground. And the same can be done in the workplace. I feel like people become so conflict adverse and so PC, which I couldn't be more supportive of all forms of diversity inclusion and not offending people based on their beliefs, but we've done it to a point of disservice is what I'm seeing, and that we're not having those difficult conversations as an opportunity to understand where somebody else is coming, approach it with an empathetic standpoint, and look for the solution that creates the greatest good for all involved.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The generations, identifying those in your workforce and the gaps that are related to those generations and the differences and how they approach things is so important. We hear that all the time. We want to have diversity, inclusion, sensitivity. Listen, more than supportive of HR, but looking at that from a generational perspective is probably the most important. Just because someone said it doesn't mean it's so. Understanding how the workforce was working for the 25 years before you joined an organization or such. And the same, those that have been there 25 years, understanding what those new employees coming into the organization really need and want is so important, so important. Much more of a service than, just, hey, I want to, go ahead and do diversity and inclusion training. Well, what does that mean? So those are some deeper conversations for organizations for sure.
Yeah. And that I feel like you're dropping just such amazing wisdom for any business owners and leaders who are listening in. From your perspective, because I agree with the generational gap, there's just such widely different needs based on what generation of people are in the workforce today. What do you see the younger generations? Because ultimately, if you're not appealing to the younger generations, your business will be obsolete. It's something I post about, and I'm very passionate about talking about. It's either change now or risk not being around, because the older generations are getting older and are leaving the workforce. So it's time to appeal to the younger talent. What do you find they value from your perspective? What do do businesses need to be mindful of to attract and retain that really top young talent?
Yeah, and you and I talked about this right on our first meeting. We actually had a good, passionate conversation because I think we both have so much passion around it. Listen, I'm the senior part of workforce, right? I'm the baby boomers, right? So we're the seniors in the workforce, right? Not old people, we're seniors. And, when we were widely going out and taking our first jobs or looking at that, it was go in, do your job, you're getting paid well. Hey, get your insurance, your 401k, and you're set for life. You're set for life. That's our workforce, right? And we were hard workers right in there doing the job. And if you look at the younger workforce coming in, they're like, okay, I can set myself up for success with my retirement. I think that they look at investments very differently. So in some instances, hey, I have a 401k. Not so important to them. Healthcare, they can stay on their parents' healthcare to well into their 26 in a lot of states. So that really early person coming in out of college, not so much of a benefit for them. But what I'm finding from all of that younger, right up to the millennials, is they want to be heard. When they say, listen, what's diversity, inclusion, what's people and culture, they want to know how your company is addressing things. How are you helping with your footprint on the country, the world? What are you doing as an organization? I want training and development. They want training and development. They don't want to just come in, do their job, and that's it. And training and development doesn't mean to the next level, but looking at skills that will help them grow professionally. It could be, you and I talked about it, right? DISC training. It could be generalized how to have a negative conversation, how to improve your performance. And they definitely, I think, work-life balance. They want the ability to be involved in work, have work, kind of end when they leave, and have their own balance personally, and to work to support that. Whether or not that's, health and wellness, if it's, community projects and companies that allow for that. I think those are the critical points that I see. They want their job to be bigger than just their job requirement. And they want the organization they're working for to recognize that. They don't expect it all to be there, but recognizing that, having conversations, how important is it for a business owner, a COO, to have a quarterly Zoom like you and I are doing? What are the challenges that we're all feeling today in work, our environment? Really, hey, these are the 20 new people that just joined our organization. Here's where they come from. Their bio doesn't necessarily just have to be their kind of professional bio, but how do they handle themselves? What's their best way of working with you or working together? So I think those are important changes that employers need to understand. It can't just be, well, I pay them well, they have their 401k, they have their dental, they can come to work. No, it's not going to work that way. They want to do things differently. And you and I laughed about it. My husband owns a business as well. So I like to say I hear the challenges at the executive table and the dinner table. Some of the older blue collar industries are really struggling with retaining employees. And I say, ask the question, ask those employees, what's important to them? And it may be as simple as, well, you guys do everything on paper. Is there any way I can do, certain things on my smartphone? Can you, enhance some technology for this job? And those are things to look at. Every employer needs to look at them. You're exactly right. Every single employer, every industry.
Yeah, total mic drop moment, Julie. And a couple things that came up for me while you were educating us is one, you keep saying ask the people, and I couldn't agree more. That is where this knowledge is power. However, depending on what culture you have in place and the level of openness, your employees may not answer you. It may be too late. You may have to bring in an expert in this skill set to get honest responses and that information out of your teams. Because in some cases, transparency hasn't been there. Somebody's worked for you for 5 years and it hasn't been a super transparent organization, and they feel like, hey, voicing some really unusual ideas is not supported here. Well, it's a pandemic and employment has never been higher. So people are not willing to rock the boat right now. I'm hearing that from the workforce as well. Like, yeah, I'd like to see changes, but I'm just keeping my mouth shut. I don't want to be the next person to lose my job. So I'm just hanging on to it. So that's where I'm really seeing this cultural shift, where there's an opportunity to partner with people like yourself, Julie, or consultants, people who have done this before and have a proven track record of being able to get people to feel very comfortable providing detailed information. They may even say, I don't like my bonus structure. They tell me to do this, but I'm bonus for doing this, and I'm going to go after the bonus. But then I constantly have my boss coming back and saying, hey, you're not doing this task as well as you could. And you're like, well, cool. I mean, pay me to do that task and I probably will do it better. I think these conversations are the type of conversations we need to have, because there is a solution that benefits everybody involved. At the end of the day, business leaders want to maximize their revenue and profitability. That's simple. And they can do so by making their teams really happy and efficient. And you mentioned, diversity and inclusion and just the younger generations wanting to have what I call a seat at the table. They want to feel heard, feel valued, and know that they're making an impact, and know how their role fits into the greater mission of the organization as a whole, even at an entry level. And to me, I kind of laugh about diversity and inclusion being such a hot button, not because it's not an important topic, it certainly is, and it's long overdue, but because look to them, they can teach us. They come in and say, I'm entry level, but I'm really important too. And of course, everybody matters. And of course you can have tattoos, and of course you can be whoever you want. They were raised that way. So diversity and inclusion training to me is for the older generations. It's for people like you and me, Julie, who were just kind of raised in a different environment culturally in the workplace and need to make sure that we're keeping up. But the younger generations often don't need to sit through a classroom. And if you ask them, they will tell you that. They will say, I'm offended that you're making me sit through this when I know this stuff and you're the one who needs to learn. And understanding that disconnect, again, if you take emotions out of their response and just really look at the information, it's extremely powerful, candid feedback to receive from your teams. Julie, kind of with that said, what would you say to a business leader who maybe has done this exercise, has asked some questions, has some feedback, really senses strongly there's a need for cultural change, but doesn't know where to start? So you talked about time blocking and education, but anything else that you would encourage a business leader who's kind of early on in this process and struggling with, how do we drive change? Where should they get started?
I think that you hit on a couple things in there, Nikki, which made me laugh, because I think of an employer years ago, and you're right. The newer generation, this is their innate actions lifestyle. They live at diversity inclusion. They live a more open network and their lifestyle. So when we say we're doing training, you're correct. They're looking at us, and I'm like, what we're really going to talk about is the generations and how that plays in. And believe me, your input is important because they get to hear things differently, right? And I was working with kind of a lab years ago, and I smile and laugh because it was, he was in the baby boomer end cycle, and, he was like, well, nobody even comes to the holiday parties anymore. I changed it to holiday party. I spent so much money. I said, have you ever sent out a survey and asked if they even want a holiday party? And he looked at me and I said, do me a favor. If I'm wrong, I'll waive my consulting fee for the month. We're going to send out a survey monkey, to your point of being able to answer something open and honest, right? Because it's just survey monkey, and the feedback is, going to be handled by an outside HR, and we're going to provide the results, not the actual data. And it's pretty anonymous. And I said, give them 4 choices. Hey, we wanted to know if you enjoy the holiday party. Would you rather a family gift certificate to something, Six Flags, King's Bowling? Would you prefer to order a meal that's going to be sent to your house for the holidays? Or would you prefer a check? And when they resulted that, I said, I'm going to tell you that it's going to come back that only, probably looking at your workforce, 25% want that holiday party. And here's the point. You can still do it all. Have the holiday party for the 25% that want it, but don't require the whole organization to go there. And like you said, introverts that don't want to socialize with, other people and things, give them what they need, right? And whether it's the family amusement, all of your employees, he got so much feedback. Wow, this is great. Thanks for finally asking. I love it. Yeah, I'd rather this. I mean, they were happy to disclose who they were. It didn't even need to be anonymous. So it was a big eye opener, for the business owner in themselves. So, that's like kind of step one to recognizing I need innovative change and I don't really know what I'm doing, and understanding it's a process. You don't come in and say, oh, can we get this training and we're going to change our culture? It happens and involves over time. I think that looking at, the basics in HR, your compliance. What does an employee see when they first are onboarded into your organization? Does everything come in a nice streamlined process where all the data that they need to do is easy, accessible for them to understand and complete? That just lends right away. Wow, this organization really cares about me understanding what I'm doing when I'm onboarding as a new employee. I really promote, listen, you need a 30 or 60-day touch point, and it could be an email. You do not need to overcomplicate it, but reaching out to a new employee and saying, hey, do you know where to find your paycheck? Were you able to find your manager's phone number? Have you been able to, perform your job? Do you know what telephone numbers are able to reach the corporate office? Did you get your benefit package? I mean, you could just make it so simple, but then an employee feels like someone knows they're there and is available to them. And then moving into, hey, the employees are here. What does it look like for kind of a training? Do we have the capacity to have, kind of a new employee orientation? And what would that include? So I think you really have to back into it from step one about how you're going to bring newer employees into your organization. And for those that are already there, kind of looking back at where you can involve them in that process, whether it's mentoring or leadership or connecting them with a new employee. So you have to look at everything in an organization. It's not just, hey, I want leadership and communication training. Okay, what does your onboarding look like? What does your compliance look like? Have you even looked at any of your policies and things that you're offering to your employees and how they see that? Do they have an opportunity to call someone and ask questions that are important to them about their healthcare, their own family's medications and things? That's all part of understanding people and culture. It's not just a training module. So we like to go in and kind of, I'll say, peel back the layers of the onion, see where the organization is at, and then make recommendations. So it happens over a process, and give them a kind of an outline. It's not just come in and do training and let's hope everyone changes. That's not going to work.
Yeah, good things take time. So if you want to create a drastic change and a positive outcome, you can't expect to just use a buzzword and then have a one-day training. And now the last 10 years is wiped clean in that one day. It's a process, a walk towards change. And
there'll be failures during that process.
100%. How else can you learn?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That is how we learn. Whoop, that didn't work. Let's go forward and keep trying.
Yeah.
But yeah, onboarding. Yeah. I've long said, just again, from my own experience, and then as part of coaching my teams, especially bringing on a new hire, onboarding is so important. I think that a lot of people, I've always just kind of said as a joke, the time frame gets longer as you move up in your career. I think it started, I was like, well, the first month on a new job is just spent trying to not look like an idiot. And then it was 3 months, and then 6 months. And then if you're in business for yourself, it's like that first year, you're like, what am I doing? It's going to come together.
Yeah. So, did it work?
Yeah, you have to be mindful of that, though. If somebody is spending months feeling disconnected and genuinely cares and wants to make an impact in the organization, but it takes time to learn all the layers of the organization and who does what and build relationships, there's a real sense of insecurity and I'm not smart enough. We're just so hard on ourselves. We're our own worst critic. I'm not smart enough to get this, even though the organization will say, you're not expected. We expect it to take 6 months for you to ramp up and be efficient in this role. You still fight that battle of I should be able to do it in 4. I know I'm smart. And so having those touch points just alleviates that kind of mental break. Hey, how are you doing? I know that there's a lot to learn. This is overwhelming. You're doing awesome for where you're at. How can I help you? Are there any problems that I can move off your plate? Is there anybody you're still unclear what they do in the organization? Can I introduce you around? Those things just on a human level make people feel like they're not alone. And that's ultimately what we're all seeking for in this life, is to know we're not alone and we're supported and we're not crazy and all those things. Bringing that element in, I think is underutilized because we're so focused on units and revenue and productivity, which I get it. I've been a business leader with P&L responsibility. You have to manage to the numbers. That's what we do in the workplace, but not having a really strong focus on the soft skills and how people feel about their work really impacts productivity.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. It's one of the big things that we really advocate. And probably one of the first questions when I'm, talking with, a new business owner is one of the first questions we'll always ask Sue and I, what does your onboarding look like? And I'm not talking technology or paper because, they're all out there. Puzzle's agnostic to technology. We kind of work whatever an organization has in place, but what does that look like? what does that look like? Is it someone who just fills out a bunch of paperwork? And it matters in every industry, from Dunkin' Donuts to your professional organization. So if you're a Dunkin' Donuts where they come in, they fill in an application, they hand it in, there still has to be an onboarding process there, whether that's meeting with the manager or the GM who kind of introduces themselves, lets them know the goals and the expectations in that, environment. So it's one of the first areas that I have always targeted and asked, a prospective business owner, a client, what does your onboarding look like? How do you bring people into your organization? What does it look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so important. It's eye-opening. I'm really grateful. I learned that lesson at like 15, 16. I was working at Applebee's as like a hostess, just greeting people and taking them to their table, and had the opportunity to be trained as a certified corporate trainer who did store openings around primarily the state. I was 15, so wasn't going too far for work at this point. But I went through like a certified training to train and onboard the hostesses, and specifically when new stores were opening, to bring Applebee's culture and kind of package that, and the front of the house staff, specifically the entire hostess team. So I would travel around, open stores, train them all, sometimes bring people into my store and like train me there. And it was so interesting with that, franchise model. Like they just do that so well. Like, here's the culture, here you go, put this in place here, you get the people. So that was so eye-opening for me at 16. And it's kind of like the starting point of my passion for bringing it into a more professional environment. But you're spot on, Dunkin' Donuts. It doesn't matter where you are. If you want somebody to come in, understand the culture, and feel a part of it, you have to include that in your onboarding process and make sure that they, again, really know that you care about it. It's not just words on a piece of paper.
Yeah, I was going to say Applebee's found your energy at 16, right? But that's the point, right? Finding who's the best person to represent. So you were 16, but your energy, your excitement, they knew that you would be great training, and you're presenting their brand. Hey, if this is who they're hiring to train us, then that's what they're looking for from me. So there's the onboarding that franchises really do recognize very early on.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they said, I was one of the youngest people who'd had that certified trainer, that they usually, that was the downside. They weren't sure that they wanted me in the program because I was 15 when I started and 16 when it ended. They were like, this might be a bad idea. But my manager was like, they're like, you don't understand. People didn't show, everybody got sick, or it was Applebee's. Everybody went out and partied the night before and didn't show up for work. And I was too young to be out partying with people. And so the manager was like, I don't know what to do, and gave me the manager keys because there was 3 of us. And so that was, I actually like waited tables and bartended at 16 as well, not on a regular basis, but but they were like, just do it. They were like, she's a go-getter. They're like, I gave her the manager keys and she figured out how to do it. Exactly. Shifting gears a little bit, I love to ask a couple personal questions to help the audience just get to know you better.
Oh gosh, these are the ones that are always the challenge.
But they're fun. Yes. What's the best compliment you've ever received in your professional life? I'm sure you get loads of compliments, but I love giving people an opportunity to answer this question.
The best compliment in my professional life, I think, has been, you have great leadership ability and the ability to quickly identify, kind of someone's personality traits. So, really understanding that is such a key asset. So I think that, that was identified and given to me early on in my career, and really when I was actually in finance and director of operations. So I think it kind of helped mold me more towards the HR role, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. It's so amazing when like your just absolute skill sets in life and what is natural to you can transition into your professional life as well. If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, go with the flow. It's not going to matter, right? Go with the flow, right? Accept the change, accept the adversity, just go with it. Just go with it.
Water under the bridge, and we're all like 70% water anyway. So just
it is not gonna matter, right? And where you are then, you may not be where you are in the future. So just go with the flow. Accept the change, look at the opportunities, and just go with it.
And it reminds me of a fable that somebody shared with me, and I won't go too much into depth, but it was like things were happening that could be construed as bad, and this farmer would be like, good or bad, right or wrong, who's to say? And the story keeps spiraling, and that like what looked bad became good, and what looked good became a bad thing with 3 months later. So ultimately, we're so focused on this feels good, this feels bad, right, wrong, change, not change. And good and bad, right, and wrong, like they don't even exist. So just go with it and see where it takes you. More often than not, things are exactly where they need to be. They're either teaching you something or they're improving, and they teach you something so that you can make those improvements.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, exactly. I think of the things that I put so much unnecessary worry into, and I look at it now saying, wow, that was a lot of energy wasted, a lot of energy wasted. So go with the flow, seize the opportunities, go with the conflict and adversity, because it's going to bring you to the point where you're most successful.
Yeah, 100%. Amen. Switching gears back into a little bit of the work stuff and story specifically, do you have a favorite? We've talked a lot about employers and employees and what makes them happy, but I love sharing the stories behind that. Do you have a favorite employee experience story centered around culture change that you can share with our audience today?
Yes, actually, it just, this one would come right to mind because it's an employee for a former organization that I had been servicing for years, and they are in one career path. And she reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you mind having a conversation with me?" And I was like, "Well, sure, but I'm no longer, kind of the HR consultant for your organization." She said, "No, it's personal." I said, "Oh, okay, great." So we had a nice conversation. She called. She said, "I've been aligned in this very particular career for many years. And again, it was very focused." And she says, "But through all the training and all the work you did here in HR and really helping me as a manager to kind of do performance reviews and have conflict with employees or helping them to achieve their goals, I've decided I want a career in HR. So I was hoping that you could help me decide or identify where would be the best place to focus my continued education on? Where do you think I should, kind of head in that direction?" So that was huge. I was like, "Oh, I was so happy to hear that she wanted to move into HR." There's so many facets of HR. And I'm much more of a strategic HR professional, hence why I'm working with business owners, right? The overall business needs, how do we achieve them? How do we get there? And she's going to make a great people and culture. I say HR. She loves that onboarding. She loves to be the face of the employer with the employees. She loves to feel that success and engagement. So it was a great conversation. So I found that like, wow, everything was so, rewarding for the past 10 years then, if someone could see that change in themselves. And it kind of goes where I said, right, Nikki, go with the flow. Because you're going to end up where she didn't think she'd ever end up.
Exactly. You just never know where life's taking you. And what a huge kudos to you, Julie, just, sharing that story. Like, I just hear that you're a role model and mentor to people that you're consulting with, and that they're remembering you even when you move on and saying, "Hey, you inspired me to take a leap and make myself happier in life and in work." So we need more people like you who are making that kind of impact in the professional life.
Yeah. I love what I do. I don't think of myself as a mentor. I just, as I said, I'm in the senior part of my career. I can share experiences, the things that I didn't go with the flow. I now know, hey, I can help people make, a different decision based on that. So to your point, generations, experiences, it all lends to being able to have a different conversation. Just hearing someone else's perspective. That's what I like to bring. Hey, here's my perspective. Have you ever tried this? Mm-hmm. And see where it takes you. But yeah,
because we all learn from each other. Like when you share those perspectives openly, you're like, wow, like I would have never thought of it this way. And I got smarter.
Learn every day. Listen, I learn every day. I learn talking to you. I learn, different perspectives, and it's great. I love it.
And likewise, and good segue to this next question, Julie. You're kind of at the point in your career where you are an influential person and you love it, and that passion shines through. So people naturally view you as a mentor and a role model, because I think everybody wants to have a career that they genuinely love. So that to me is what defines you as a mentor and role model, is that you're doing a career you love, making an impact. People see that and then say, "I want to be like Julie. Let me reach out to her." But tell me about, kind of what helped you get to this point. Tell me about one, or you can answer with a couple if it's too hard to say one of the most influential people in your professional life.
Well, I think, I would say business coaching was one very influential, really identifying, we all have personality traits that are very positive in some arenas of our life, and then very negative in other arenas of our life. And when you can harness how those react negative and positive, you can make a difference in which direction you're going to head. So early on, I'd say in my 30s, I was working in the medical profession. Again, from the business standpoint, kind of operations. And at that point, in a smaller organization, your operations, HR, your everything. But, it was actually a physician who said to me, "Hey, listen, you're a bull. And I took that positive. He's like, it's, what makes you great, right? It's how you can tackle in and overcome the adversity and the projects and the challenges that are in here. But you also have to recognize that sometimes you have to harness that so that you're not like, kind of taking everyone with you. So really understanding that can be negative or positive. So when I'm sitting in an operation seat would be a great example. If I'm sitting in an operation seat for an organization, you want someone who's driven, an executor, and a bull. They're just going to say, yeah, we can do it. They're not going to be kind of stagnated or hesitate on all those little details. But working with employees in HR, you have to kind of harness that because everybody has to take their own time and their own pace to figure things out. So I had to learn when to use that personality trait negatively and when it was going to positively impact me. So I think learning that early on was a huge impact because I would stop and think about that a lot in directives that I was, engaging with.
Self-awareness is key. Yeah, we're all a mix of beautiful, wonderful light attributes and some not so beautiful attributes, but just having the self-awareness, because again, it can show up as a positive and we're all multidimensional. It can show up as a positive in one area and just not really serve you in another. How did you go about, so you said business coaching, were there any books that you read or any people, like are there any resources that you can share with the audience about how you develop that skill set over time?
But listen, you can almost get business coaching on YouTube now, right? Business coaches don't want to hear that, but there is lots of things out there on how to have a negative conversation. I think that's key. Understanding that every person, Nikki, you brought up a great point, has a negative and a positive trait. That's, kind of, funnels. Again, that's some of the opportunities that, employers or employees can seek out. Hey, I'd love to get a DISC training. I'd like to identify my positive and negative personality traits and how I can apply them in work. But I think that, The Power of Now is a great book. It's really a hard read. Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. I read it years ago and I still remember it, right? It's one of those books that I'll remember the name and the author, really focusing on what you have now, what's in front of you today. And, our minds are just triggered to go backwards and forwards, back to the negative and not the positive. And there was some great parts in there about focusing on what do I have today? How can I go forward? We met Puzzle HR was, graced us with John Foley, who was one of the lead pilots for the Blue Angels. And he's kind of started a movement, glad to be here. And he really talks about the discipline and things that he learned as a Blue Angel and how to apply that to life and work. So I think, role models like that have a lot of content on their websites, their books are available, is great. Focusing on your personality traits and how you apply them in life and your work is probably one of the best education reads you can do. Whether eat a podcast, listen to them on a podcast. They're all out there.
Yes. I'm so passionate about this. I'm like, everything exists. Like people, I even have a joke, like inventing an industry that doesn't exist. It's totally tongue in cheek. Everything exists. Like my good vibe, right. My good vibes only. I'm like, that's also tongue in cheek. I really like puns. Everything exists. And the exciting thing about that is you have nothing but knowledge at your fingertips in a way that you prefer to digest. So you want short form video, that's out there. You want long form video, that's out there. You want a book and to read it, that's out there. You want an audiobook or a podcast, you want to listen, that's out there. So the information is at your fingertips. Just find people and topics that resonate with you and use it as an opportunity to educate yourself and level up and become the best version of yourself.
Yeah, years ago, when we learned training, it was, people would say, oh, why do we have to do an in-person training? I said, because everyone's different. Some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners, and some people just have to process. So if you could do a training and have a PowerPoint behind you where someone actually can read and you're talking, again, you and I talk, we love our hands, right? And you're talking, you can impact a whole audience. And it's kind of the same when you're looking for your own self-improvement. If you hear it, you will retain it. If you see it, you'll remember it, right? It's why crime investigations will take 5 people that just saw the same thing and what did they see? So everybody takes a little piece of something. And in my own personal life, when I said podcast, not a sales pitch, but, I walk, really am trying to get that 3-mile walk in, and that's important to start my day. So, hey, I throw in the headphones now and listen to a podcast. What else can I learn that's out there? What else is available? And it's remarkable how much you'll retain from that kind of environment. And if you're a visual learner, then you're right. Go on a video. But if you're auditory, throw in the headphones on your walk or your, visit to the ocean and throw in something today. But I think understanding personality traits and how they drive you really helps in everything, relationships, work, across the board.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'm so excited about this topic today, Julie. So I think we're running up at the end of time, but I'd like to use the rest of the opportunity to say, are there any questions you wish I'd asked you today? And if so, how would you have answered?
Oh, geez, Nikki, do I know you're so charismatic and you kind of hit all the topics because you're out there. I don't. I think that you have a great overview of what's needed and how that impacts and where employers and HR can make a significant impact in the changes that your workforce yourself are looking for. And you bring a very good perspective, having been remote since 2004, because I think that's a huge challenge in the workforce. So I don't know. Nothing comes up in the mind that I wished you asked.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Julie. I really appreciate your kind words about the charisma and just kind of having my finger on the pulse. It's something I'm massively passionate about, helping people be happy at work.
And it shows. And if I, listen, if you and I were talking in an employer situation, I would say that like you'd be a trainer for the organization. And it was even this morning when I was talking with Sue, who I work with here on my team. And I said, oh, it's going to be awesome. I said, Nikki has so much energy. My whole rest of the day is going to be great. The energy and the honesty and I love how you approach diversity, inclusion and all of that. I think you bring a really great perspective. And so I was super happy to do it. I knew the energy would be great. And you and I talked about it, right? I saw the questions. I go, I'm going to just pinch hit. I know you rock it. So yeah. I think you did a great job and I was happy to be part of the conversation.
Likewise. And for everybody listening, Julie shared with me, this is her first podcast interview. So couldn't echo the compliments more, Julie, in terms of you just bringing it with your energy, your experience, your passion, your heart, and your kindness. And this was such a pleasure to talk to you today. Before we wrap up, since my podcast and brand is centered on people and brands who are making a revolutionary difference in their field. And I think you're bringing a revolutionary difference, bridging the gap between the boomer generation, the millennials, and how to just break down those silos and make people understand what the other one's all about to come up with a solution that works for all. With that said, what does being revolutionary mean to you, Julie?
Oh, I think you're right. Leading that change, being part of the change that's evolving. I joined Puzzle HR because I think they're a revolutionary organization. They started right before COVID. They come from, the world of HR outsourcing for many, many years and wanted to do things differently. So I joined them because I love the energy and the revolutionary change they're bringing. And we talked a little bit about it, the importance of employee onboarding, helping leadership understand where they can improve in training and diversity. So for me, revolutionary would be seeing HR as a headcount in every organization, an actual headcount. Whether that's using an outsourced HR, whether that's having, 2 to 3. So really having an HR a headcount in every organization, I would consider revolutionary for sure.
All right. Well, you got my vote. On with the revolution.
Exactly.
Julie, thank you so much for your time today. Such a pleasure. For anybody listening who'd like to connect with Julie, her LinkedIn profile as well as Puzzle HR will be in the description box for YouTube and on Spotify. So please check that out and reach out to her directly. She is a wealth of knowledge. Julie, thank you so much for your time today and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much. Have a great day. I will. Thanks for all the energy.